Hello and welcome to DEECide, Digital Era Entertainment's weekly anime podcast. This is episode number 181. I'm your host, Joel, and joining me live on the line is Jace.
Hello.
Hello, Jace. It has all come down to this. It is finally time. This is the last show of 2023. The day of broadcast is December 29th, and that means it is time for the DEECide Anime of the Year show. This is something I've come to look forward to every year that just... We watch a lot of anime. We don't watch every anime, but to our credit, between the two of us alone, we watch at least half of the airing premieres as the seasons go on.
Gotta be at least like 60 shows a year, roughly.
Easily. And that's probably what we end up getting completed, that we watch even more in terms of the premieres and then whittle things down because we're not quite...
We watched like, 18 shows, I think? Like this season alone on premiere day.
Yeah, we're not quite so absurd that we're going to be keeping up with 18 shows through to the end, but we watch several standard deviations more than the average anime fan, and I feel rather confident in that statement. Obviously, we are not saying that we have the ultimate decision on taste and significance here, that this time of year, you're going to have many, many folks doing Anime of the Year, either lists or just outright what is your number ones. And there are many folks that have far greater reach than us. We certainly have no delusions of grandeur, but that this is something that for us, with our own biases acknowledged, that we like to do every year. And it's something that I enjoy just from my own sort of mental filtering perspective, that every season, whether it is winter, so the first season of the year, or fall, that I'm always thinking, especially at the end of a season, is this something I could see in my top 10? And just thinking of things in a broader scope and trying to approach things from a number of different ways, because I think that anime is one of the most difficult mediums to actually assign a top ranking to. Because for the Tony Awards, for musicals, you have the distinct beginning and end of a musical. Same thing for movies. For music, you have this is what is on the song. This is what is on the album. But that for anime, and then for the Emmys, when you have ongoing series, that some series are going to be a single season. Some are going to be multiple. Some are going to be in hour chunks as opposed to 30 or 22-minute episodes. There's so much variance, and then just the length of the actual production itself and whether or not that production is complete. It creates so many different variables, so many different considerations.
Will we get a season 2 or not? Or, like whether or not a manga is ongoing, is a big question. Because, I mean, I saw a meme recently where they pointed out how many of the quote unquote new generation of manga that have come out in recent years have ended while One Piece is still ongoing to this day.
Yes. So there is really no exact science for how to do a list like this, how to do rankings like this. But we have come to a agreement here at Digital Era Entertainment on DEECide on how we handle things, and the rules are relatively simple. To be considered eligible, it needs to have been a Japanese-produced show. That is our definition of anime here. It is a very simple, deliberate, geographic-based distinction. If it was produced in Japan primarily, that if there was some secondary studio in the US or elsewhere that had, a couple of cuts that they did or that they helped with some of the shading or whatnot, that's fine. But as long as the primary production studio is in Japan, that is number one. 2, it must have been available for legal viewing outside of Japan, specifically in North America, in this year. So, for example, last year, we did not actually have Summertime Rendering as a eligible entry because while it had aired in Japan, it had not actually become available in the West, in North America, until January of 2023. That said, Summertime Rendering is still not eligible because of rule number 3, and that is the rule that is very specific to us here at DEECide, and the
DQ rule.
the DQ rule, and that the spirit of the rule, the phrasing of the rule is a member, either past or present or close friend of Digital Era Entertainment, cannot have had a leading role in the show. Colloquially, this has become known as the Emmy rule. Because while it could extend to a number of folks, and that in the past has extended past Emmy, that Emmy is the primary offender, quote unquote, of this rule, and that she, having grown and initially been one of the hosts on this very show, we have never felt comfortable adjudicating or ranking or rating shows that she has a leading role in compared to others. It has simply never felt comfortable or right for us. And that every year it means that a couple of shows end up being ineligible, usually ones that would be very highly ranked. For instance, last year, I consider it a great favor that she did to us by being Lucy in Cyberpunk Edgerunners and making it so we didn't have to rate it, because that would have made our jobs even harder, because it was an amazing show and she had an amazing performance. There are various other ones going back, but this year there were 3 leading roles, that being in Buddy Daddies, The Apothecary Diaries, and Summertime Rendering. So those 3 are ineligible for our consideration. Other than that, it's just, it has to have been started in this calendar year, available in North America. So if it had its first season last year and had season 2 this year, it's not eligible anymore. Every show gets one shot, and this is where we vary from a lot of places like Crunchyroll's Anime Awards. Most other ones I feel fall into our camp of it has to have premiered in a given year, because otherwise One Piece is perpetually eligible, and that's just for practical sake not
It
gonna
is the
work.
show that never ends.
But it's also going to be why you're probably going to see, once again, Jujutsu Kaisen and Attack on Titan sweep up a lot of things in the Anime Awards this year, and that I'm going to grumble a little about it, and they're deserving. They're amazing shows. The productions are wonderful, but I don't think it gives other shows a fair shake when you have these long, winding, continuing things that are able to overshadow, because frankly, you can write more compelling things and you are likely to get greater funding when you are a long-running show that is proven and one that a studio knows is going to be a cash cow. So there's just too many things there that we don't allow. And even so, we have a lot of very viable options this year. The number of shows that premiered this year was absurdly high, and we have narrowed it down to what we do every year. We have our top 10 and then 6 honorable mentions, which are unranked. So let's get into it. The DEECide 2023 Anime of the Year list, starting with the honorable mentions. And again, these are in no particular order. Jace, let's start with the one that you've been watching again, but this time in live action, because you enjoyed it a lot and also have enjoyed it in live action now.
Yes. So I joked around when this was first airing. I called it Lifetime Original Movie, the anime. And now I can call it Lifetime Original Movie, the Japanese drama. My Home Hero. So, My Home Hero is the story of
It is a
Tetsuo
parent who wants to
Tosu.
protect their child. It is, in a lot of ways, it's the type of cerebral show that I love.
Yeah.
Types of things like Death Note, Code Geass, because it is all about the main character trying to outsmart their situation, but that in this case, it's someone who enjoys murder writing, having to murder someone to protect someone else, and then being in the crosshairs of organized crime. That the crime he commits is very much, well, not technically a self-defense. It is killing someone who very explicitly states, I plan to kill your daughter. So in terms of sort of moral high grounds, our main character very much has a defense there, but then it's him trying to outsmart the mafia, the Yakuza, and it is a thriller. The production values, I'd say, are a bit below average, but I think the performances are good, the writing is solid, and just the tension you feel in this show is very well executed.
Yeah. I mean, it's Tezuka Productions. They have a pedigree, for being around for as long as they've been around for. but I mean, this isn't going to be, you know, it doesn't need to be, your high quality over the top animation that you see in your action thrillers of your production IG or your mappas, because we are telling a seinen drama, and this does exactly what it does well, and the live action, proud to say, it's on Hulu and it does just as well of a good job. And weirdly enough, not only is this getting a live action series, it's also getting a film adaptation in Japanese theaters next March. So if you
I'll be
enjoy
interested
My
to
Home
see how they
Hero,
press it because I think that it
yeah,
is the perfect length and it's left
yeah.
potentially open for more, but it also comes to what could be a very satisfying conclusion.
Weirdly enough, the manga is still ongoing. So there's more beyond how it ended. Could there be a second season in the future for it? Who knows? But
Maybe I wouldn't bet on it. I
I
don't
wouldn't bet
think
on
it
it either.
had
I
enough
feel like it ended
popularity.
well. I feel like it had a satisfying finale, and this is why it's good enough on its own to stand in our honorable mentions.
Yes. Up next, we have the it's the best darn spooky anime I've seen in a while, and I say this as
Yeah.
someone who isn't into horror, but that I like what it's doing for the genre. It's one that I admittedly dropped because it's just not to my taste, but it was one that I, even as I was dropping it, said, this is keeping up its end of the bargain for people who want a good horror show to chew on every week, and that's Dark Gathering.
I adored this show. I've joked around because this was brought to us by Oriental Light and Magic, OLM. Uh, I called it the origins of the Hex Maniac from Pokemon because we very much saw the origins of this cute little purple-haired girl who was capturing spirits and fighting ghosts with other ghosts. And OLM is one of the studios that works on Pokemon. So it very much felt like a darker, grittier, horror-infused Pokemon series.
Gotta catch 'em all?
More or less, because she's trying to catch all these spirits to feed to other spirits to make these super gigantic spirits
That's
to
basically
then fight a
Pokemon Go, right?
god.
You have to collect all of these in order to feed them to each other as candy to make them grow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And keep in mind, OLM actually took home top prize not last year, but the year before, having produced Odd Taxi, which was the runaway winner that particular year. There is not a runaway winner this year. We'll get to that later.
Now, the
So,
unfortunate side effect of this is that this is an ongoing manga, and as I read on my anime list, the show ends with them going, "All right, we're going to fight a god." In That's it. And it's like, okay, to be continued. That's right. They end on a cliffhanger right around somewhere like volume 9 of the manga. The manga's ongoing. They are in volume 14 in Japan. Um,
puts it at an
yeah,
awkward spot where it's not quite enough yet for another full season, but it's kind of close because it did have 24 episodes, not 12.
yeah.
So by this time next year, they could have, even with just one or two more volumes, enough to get another 12 episodes out of it. But this is a show that didn't really capture mainstream audiences, so I'm not sure if it's going to get greenlit. We'll see. We hope.
I'm
For what it
I-
is,
I'm
if
hoping
you
for more
enjoy
spoopy
horror,
times next year.
yeah, if you enjoy horror and are just looking for some good episodic installations that have somewhat of a overarching story, but this is a very well done show for its genre. And the fact that it runs on such a small cast that essentially this is a three-person show. There
Yep.
are a couple folks, a couple spirits that are introduced, but by and large, it's three characters, and really it's two. So good performances all around. And if you like horror, this is a treat. Dark Gathering is definitely in that honorable mentions. Next is one that I only watched recently because you kept hounding me about it, Jace,
Yep.
and saying that it was very good, that it was one of the better overpowered fantasies you've seen, and that you were ranking it above shows that I was enjoying. And by the combination of certain shows that I was enjoying falling off near the end of the season, and us deciding that we were each going to assign the other one series that we knew the other hadn't watched to watch, that I watched it not all the way through. I'm up through episode 9, but very much enjoying it and was very comfortable putting it in the honorable mentions, and that's Ragna Crimson.
I have loved this show so far. In fact, one of the shows that dropped off at the end of the season was Kingdoms of Ruin, and I kept on saying that, like, the Ragnar Crimson basically puts Kingdoms of Ruin to shame. It's just the characters are so much more likable. The world building is so much more enjoyable, and just everything about this show, the villains are so much more well developed. It is, and it's the best part is that we are in for a second core, like, right around the corner too. So I mean, we are right in the middle of it, between seasons, as we are recording this episode. So it's just like we have more to look forward to next season. So
This
I'm hyped.
mm, this show, being titled after its two main characters, Ragna and Crimson, is very much carried by the latter. That Crimson is one of the most fun characters I've seen in this type of series in a while.
Mm,
That there's I don't necessarily want to say a ton of depth, but there's just so much mystery, but also the performance is delightful and the writing is so fun for them, that they are this incredibly powerful being that is just driven by and uh, hate and vengeance, and the combination of total haughtiness to their character. And I say there because
mm.
they are non-binary, that they're able to shift genders at will, they're able to disguise themselves at will, um, and that they are so confident, so domineering, and that the way they carry themselves is so fun. And combine that with, I would say, an above average supporting cast. Not something that's able to break into the top 10, but definitely it blew out Kingdoms of Ruin, which I had been enjoying, and that's definitely one that fell off. There was the Recluse Vampire Princess, which also fell off. It did not end up being the idol industry allegory that I hoped. And Ragnar Crimson is just good, gory fun with just, it lets its power scaling go off the handle very quickly, but it settles into a surprisingly good equilibrium of, okay, everything here is really, really powerful, but
Yeah.
everything here is really, really powerful. It's not just Ragnar and Crimson, but that they allow the enemies to also be terrifyingly powerful.
And there are just twists and turns abound. They are building to these plot twists, it seems, with what these dragons are, that
Mhm.
already has me going like, "Ooh, what's gonna happen next? Ooh,
And
what's
the
gonna happen
characters
next?"
are wonderfully imperfect.
Yeah.
Ragna is not some bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, well-meaning shonen pro tag. He's someone who is very much driven by emotion, even to his own detriment. He
Yep.
wants to destroy the dragons not out of some hero complex or need to protect others and defeat evil, but because otherwise he's going to die and many others will die, and that they threatened his friend.
Yeah.
But that even the dragons, they have their own twisted senses of morality and duty and obsession with the dragon god in their own different ways. And the way the characters interact, I think, is very fun and interesting. So Ragnar Crimson there. Then moving on to a much softer show. We're not going with horror anymore. We're not going with the murdering and avoiding the Yakuza. It's not bloody killing the dragons. It is another PA Works show, which they are known for their more slice of life, calm human shows. And this is another one of those installments. It's not the best they've ever done, but to be fair, the best that PA Works has ever done is very, very, very good. And Skip and Loafer falling into place very nicely here among the honorable mentions was not a difficult decision for us. And I don't believe you saw this one, Jace. I know Neil
No, I
Ivan
didn't.
did, and he had it in his top 8. I enjoyed this. Again, like I said, not the best PA Works has ever done, but if you're looking for a good slice of life with some wholesome romance that is handled very tastefully and that just has a good, healthy relationship, Skip and Loafer is one of the best this year. So very happy to have it in the honorable mentions. Next is a remake retelling, which I prefer over the original, which is in some cases heresy. For you in particular, Jace, it suffers because the aesthetics are not to your liking.
Yeah.
And I will still say, I know that 3D CG in anime is rough for its track record, but I stand by what I said. Studio Orange is the one studio in the industry that I fully trust with 3D CG, and that I hope you can give it a bit more. Well, because you watched it all the way through.
I watched it all the way through. And while I will say it is head and shoulders above other 3D CG that I have watched, like Ultraman, because
Yeah.
that
Well,
was
also, let's go on and get it
rough.
out there. This is Trigun Stampede.
Yeah. It's like it is head and shoulders above Ultraman. Ultraman looked like a PS3 game by comparison. Like, woof. I mean, like it is a good CG. Those early trailers that came out did not do it justice. Those look like very early renders. But I am not a fan of CG anime by far. And I will say the storytelling was great. The dub, phenomenal. Johnny Young Bosch on point. But I'm just not a fan of it compared to the original hand-drawn cells of the original anime. And this isn't me looking at it through nostalgic goggles, because the storytelling was great.
Yeah, and it's the type of thing that I almost fear that your dislike of 3D CG is dragging your enjoyment down too much. But all the same, that is something very understandable, and it obviously visuals matter. And that, as we've said, we do consider our biases here at DEECide, that we are not simply looking through everything of a lens of what is artistically the best, that we are looking for our anime of the year, and therefore your biases, even the ones that are negative, do get brought into account. So Trigun Stampede ends up in the honorable mentions. Had it been not 3D, my guess is it would have been top 10. So I think that's a very important little asterisk of, if you are someone who also just does not care for 3D CG, give it a shot anyways, but that's something to account for. Meanwhile, if you're someone who enjoys Studio Orange's take on 3D CG, your mileage may even go farther than what we have here. And then the last of our honorable mentions is one from this season, which I have thoroughly enjoyed. I know you have as well, Jace. It's a fun, silly Yuri romp, and it has a delightful, delightful dub. I'm in love with the villainess. If you
I'm in love with the dub.
They just let everyone go over the top. This is a silly, silly show. It's not a my next life is the villainess, all routes lead to doom. It's not, okay, I need to survive. This is, I just want to be with this character who I am head over heels for, who, if not, I'm the one in danger. I'm the main character. I'm safe. They're the one that's going to end up dying, and I don't want them to. And so I'm in love with the villainess, getting that last spot for the honorable mentions. I very much hope that we get a season 2 for that.
Yeah, no, the way it ends surprised me, because you'd think that something with such a simple goal, gives it kind of that feeling of finality, something that, would have that. And she lived happily ever after, with her villainous, the end. So no, there's a twist. There's a potential season 2. Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, count me in on this. This is fun. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. And now we get into our top 10. So these are now ranked And number 10 is one that I ended up dropping, not because I thought it was bad, it just didn't end up being to my taste. But I know that you, Jace, hold it in such high regard. And I know Neil Ivan enjoyed it quite a bit as well, that this is part of how things work here on DEECi, that having multiple folks means that there's balances, there's an amount of bartering and bargaining that we have in sorting out the top 10. I feel like there was actually less bartering than usual this year, that a lot of things wound up falling into place
We had
pretty
some pretty
easy.
solid
There was a
top
lot of overlap.
contenders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a
But that
lot of overlap.
ultimately we largely agreed on things, and it was more
Yeah.
just logically sussing out, okay, given how you have this ranked and how I have this ranked, and then Neil
How does
Ivan
it
has it ranked,
slot?
that just logically speaking, where does it go? And then there was really only one or two that wound up being a bit more bartery. And I'd say 8, 9, and 10 wound up being in there, but I still
Yeah.
am very solid about where we landed. So 16-bit sensation, you've spoken about it quite a bit, but
Yeah.
to put a bow on it.
Yeah, to put a little bow on it neatly. So we got this story about Konoha, who is a budding illustrator, and she finds a mysterious shop that has these games. And when she opens them up, she time travels back in time to the 90s, in which she winds up working for a older game studio. And this suddenly becomes a Back to the Future type scenario. We hit all the time travel tropes along the way. And of course, you're watching or listening to a Anime of the Year podcast. So spoilers abound. um, this goes in weird directions because there are subplots involving aliens and an altered timeline, and it goes in places that I did not expect it to go in because I was expecting something that was, going to tickle my old taku, senses and go, I remember those days, 16 bits and, yeah, no, it does that. But, then we also get like the bad future that she accidentally creates involving artificial intelligence and a matrix of creative intelligence where they link together a bunch of creative people to create an AI that's run by humans to make video games. It is weird. It gets weird. But the wholesome meaning at the end of it all about just making games and the creativity of human beings is so wholesome at the end of it all. It brought a tear to my eyes by the end of it all. I really did love this show. It is so cute. It is junk food. It was my junk food this season. So that's why it fits in nice and comfortable at the very bottom of our top 10.
Yes. Number 9 was my anime of the season in winter. I know it's one that Neil Ivan enjoyed a lot, and this was the show that, in exchange for me watching Ragnar Crimson, that I assigned to you, Jace, and it didn't hit quite as well for you, but that it still survived here in the top 10. It's one that I will continue to sing the praises of, and that is The Magical Revolution. And I actually want to get the full and proper name because it is a slightly light novel title, but it certainly doesn't behave like a normal light novel. Where did it go? Went and lost it. The Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and the Genius Young Lady. And this being just a very fun character study in a lot of ways, that the two main characters, Yuffie and Ainz, have such a delightful chemistry. The struggles that they go through in terms of emotions, relations with each other and others in the kingdom, and just their world at large. And I hope you do finish it, Jace, because the way it ends also is so strong. And it's one that you could continue, but you could also just close the book there and it would be entirely satisfying. Overall, I actually think that it's probably my number 5 show of the year. That a couple other things shift around, as we've mentioned, but I think for me, that it ends up being number 5. It was very, very strong, but understandably, this is one to taste. So if you are looking for a good, I'm going to call it mostly a romance show, but that it has those good themes of action, comedy, drama baked in, that is also not overly dramatic, that this isn't going to be like an HBO show, that this is still very, very anime. And I think
Mm.
it's part of that balance. And like I said, the characters that really drive it for me. So the magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady ends up at number 8. Or sorry, number 9. Number 8 is another rom-com of a sort. This one leaning much more into the comedy part of rom-com and having a lot more grounding in reality than the magic that you get in the magical revolution. But it's also one of the only shows I know this year that Mario Bueno has watched, and that is Tomo-Chan as a Girl.
God, where do we begin with Tomo-Chan? Because that was just kind of a universally loved by all of us across D Kai, like and in D in general, as that was airing. Like um because you have this basically a rom-com story about, the childhood friends, the tomboy and the oblivious dumbass. Yeah, and the unrequited love going on between the two.
Yeah, and it just wound up being such a fun, easy to watch show. This is one of the few things that I actually binged this year because I didn't actually watch it as it was airing, but after the fact that you and Mario spoke so highly of it, and I had a bit of time between seasons, that I said, sure, you know what? I need something light and fluffy right now. So let's go with this. And it was so easy to just hit the next episode button, next episode. And over the course of 4 or 5 days, I'd watch the whole thing, possibly less. And it was just very strong overall. This is not necessarily a show that I look at and say it's going to be remembered 10 years from now. But
Mm,
if you're looking for something good in that genre that is recent, I think this is one that 10 years from now, if you've watched it, you will still look back and say that was a very strong show. I don't
yeah.
necessarily think it's going to be one that the average anime fan necessarily remembers or has to go back and watch. It didn't necessarily do anything revolutionary, but it was just a solid installment for its genre. And if you are looking for a really wholesome rom com, it's difficult to do better this
It
year than Tomo-Chan as a Girl.
it had some good drama mixed in there at the end too. Um, plus, I will say, like, I went back and watched a few episodes dubbed. The dub was really good. The big notable thing is, of course, the character of Carol, who is voiced by Sally Amaki. She voices the character in both Japan and in America,
Yes.
and she just steals the show whenever she's involved. Dumbbell, like, my God. Oh, I had to mention that one.
Yes, and that's very
Oh,
significant that it's nigh unheard of for someone to play a role in both the sub and the dub of the show. I don't know offhand if this is a first ever. I feel like it's probably not, but it is incredibly rare.
yeah.
So that's a very special part of this as well. Tomo-Chan is a Girl coming in at number 8. Number 7 being one of the highlights of the summer season, which otherwise was rather thin. That
Yeah.
Jace, you and I noticed that this year, and at least glancing at what has been announced for 2024, it seems that the winter and summer seasons end up being less about continuations, more about new stuff. There's a bit of a lull, and that the spring and fall seasons are loaded with continuing series, loaded with heavy hitters. We will see that again in 2024, but that with the summer season of 2023, if you're actually going to break things down and look at the representatives in our top 10 and honorable mentions by season, that summer ends up with the fewest by far.
Yeah.
But
That's
that we have here our anime of the season for summer, and coming in at number 7, Undead Murder Farce. This was one that, even from our preview show, we sort of looked at and said, this looks and sounds weird in a good way.
yeah. And it was such a fun ride. Oh
Yeah.
God.
I very much compare the interaction that you have of the main characters to Bunny Girl Senpai and Haruhi and Kyon from The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, but you remove all romantic and sexual tension from it, and it's just the banter. You already have a solid mystery fantasy series here. Then you layer on just so many wonderful literary references that
Yep.
are done in one of the most balanced ways that I've seen, that it's not overbearing. You have this colorful cast of characters that you know their names, but it's nice takes on those characters. They are not beholden too much to the tropes that they're associated with. Some go in wildly different directions, but that the crux, the core of the series of these two new characters and the way that they interact, they're constantly needling each other. They're constantly just making these snide, snarky remarks, and that the other always takes it with a grin and says, just, oh, you, or yeah, you're right. And it's so rare to see that type of character interaction that it's usually going to be either the tsundere of, oh, I don't like you, yada, yada, or that they're actually just rivals and that they need to learn to like each other as the series goes on. No. From the start, you can tell that they have this established relationship and that their banter, their needling and jabbing of each other is not their love language, but it is their way of expressing caring for the other. That they do have a relationship. It is not romantic or sexual, but that they have a very deep level of trust and respect for each other, and that it's the type of thing of you will you will insult your best friends and take it with a smile in a way that anybody else speaks to you that way, you'd want to hit them. And you can tell that they are at that level.
There was also such a just understanding, like, they were in each other's head. This level of like trust that they knew exactly what was like the plan was there every time. The best laid plan for getting what they needed to get done every single time to solve whatever case it might be. It was just everything fell into place. Like dominoes. It was just mwah, chef's kiss. It was so satisfying by the end of each story.
Yes. So Undead Murder Farce at number 7. Number 6 is a show that I expect you'll see on a lot of the top 10 lists this year. And it's also one that I'm glad people are bringing attention to because it
Yep.
was buried under Hulu. And that's Heavenly
Mm,
Delusion, aka
yep.
Tengoku Daimakyo, which it's suffered from this very strange thing where on some of the platforms they've actually put the Japanese name in, you know, Roman characters, so the branding and also just general lack of publicity, but it's been nice to see a lot of the community rallying around it and helping promote and be like, hey, don't forget about this thing. It's really good because it is.
Yeah. I mean, like, this was a show that I was glued to every week because there's a sense of mystery going into it. What happened to the world? Why is it the way it is? These creatures that, are freaking attacking people, like there are so many things going on at play, and none of these mysteries are answered by the end of it. Damn it, I want it to come back for another season.
Yeah, so this is very much one that it is clear it should be getting another season. I hope that the fact that it is buried in Hulu doesn't end up having that much of a difference. That I'm guessing slash hoping in
Production
Japan.
IG did a phenomenal job with it
Yeah.
too, on top of it all.
Hmm. And
It's
this is one of the big variables that's difficult to tell for us here in the West of just how well is something doing in Japan. Because even though if something is put on Disney Plus or Hulu or Netflix here in the States, that it usually gets buried, that in Japan, they're a bit more acclimated to those platforms as go-to anime destinations because they don't have Crunchyroll, they don't have High Dive. So I'm hoping that it did well over there. It certainly feels like it did. Fingers are crossed, but
yeah,
Heavenly Delusion, it's it is a very dark series. It is a series that has very thoughtful writing. It has great world building. It is this balance of good characters with fun and caring, but also the underlying dread. It's in a lot of ways similar to a zombie series,
yeah.
that it's very human, but also has a lot to do with things that are not human. And spoiler alert, that's the only zombie mention that you're actually going to get on this particular list. Haha.
Ah,
And that brings us to the top 5. And number 5, I think, is one that we didn't necessarily expect to do as well as it did. Because on the surface, from the description, it seemed like it would be a fine piece of genre fare. And then you see episodes 1 and 2, and you realize that it's taking its genre tropes, cranking it up to 11 for the characters, the production value, and overall the emotion.
mm,
Because if you were to just read the description for Shy, you would think that this might be a comedy series, that it could just be, oh, here are the antics of a
so
superhero who's got a lot of stage fright and she's really shy. Tee hee.
Mochi the
No.
hero.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking. That was what we had said, Bochi the hero, and we were thinking that could be what this is, and that could not be farther from the truth.
No, in
Shy is
fact,
a strong contender. It is a drama first and an action second.
yeah. In fact, I mean, I put this up there as basically um kind of a anime meets tokusatsu trope take on kind of Madoka Magica almost. So there's a lot of kind of crossover with the artwork style in some
Mhm.
instances, and even some of the music. The music hits hard in this show. The music is used very well throughout it to set a lot of the scenes, to draw out a lot of the emotion. And emotion is what this show goes for. Hard. It wants you to feel first and foremost.
Mhm.
Uh, and I mean, and that's where the heroes get their power from, is from their feelings. So, if it's not making you feel, then what's the point? So I really enjoyed this show, and it wasn't just the toku tropes hitting me as a toku nerd. It was just one of these things where it was just like there was a lot at play artistically, because there were a lot of also comic book tropes going on in the artwork, because you had these kind of panel cutouts that you would see happening when characters were talking, or there was the flashback scenes when they were
Yeah.
dealing with the flashbacks in Russia where the
Artistically, this is a
snow.
very deep show that they
Yeah.
know when and where to use their budget, and they use their budget more often than not, but that they have found a very good and artistic way to implement lower, I don't wanna even say lower production, but just lower complexity animation, that they
Yeah.
know when to tastefully use watercolors. They know when they can have something that is not in motion, but told in stills, and it's clearly not a case of, "Oh, we ran out of budget," because we saw that this year with Fire Hunters. We saw what happens when you need to cut your corners. Shy does not cut corners. They are
We
executing
saw
things
that in Jujutsu
incredibly
Kaisen.
deliberately and artistically, and it is a very strong contender. If you like tokusatsu, Shy is a must-watch show. If you don't
Mm,
like tokusatsu, but you are into heroes, it's probably still a must-watch show.
Yeah. It's, hell, I mean, if you like magical girls, this is not your traditional magical girl because this
Yeah.
leans on your hero tokusatsu end
Mhm.
of that trope.
But it's also not
But
a Madoka wannabe. That
right.
I suppose it is easier to compare this to Madoka Magica than your conventional tokusatsu, just because of where it goes emotionally. But at the same
Yeah.
time, this is not the dark magical girl subgenre where everything is terrible and there is no way for there to be any good and that everyone is dying. No, this is a very human series, and that it
Yeah.
shows the good and the bad of humanity, and that as you have thematically in Magical Girl and Toku shows, the power of, as you mentioned, heart and emotion comes into play a lot. But this is not a pessimistic show. This is a very optimistic show. It will show you pessimism and it will drag you down there and show you if you have been to those places emotionally and mentally, and then show you why and how you can rise up out of those emotional depths. Shy is a show that believes in humanity, no question, and it is our number 5 anime of the year.
Really looking forward to season 2 in 2024.
Top 4 is when it got tough.
Ooh,
That
knock down,
the
drag out.
in 3 in particular, 4, I think we had it fall into place and we knew that this was our number 4. There was never really a question of it being above 4. There was never a question of it being below 4. In other years, this could have been 2 or 3. I don't know if it necessarily would have been outright anime of the year, but in any given year, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off would be a top 5 contender, no question.
I think
Obviously,
it creates a little controversy because it's Scott Pilgrim, because of
yeah.
the fact that it created a lot of discourse this year because the question, is Scott Pilgrim anime, became a big question
Well, the
when it
answer is
dropped.
very simple. Is the
Yes.
original Scott Pilgrim anime? No. Is Scott Pilgrim versus the World the movie an anime adaptation? No. Is Scott Pilgrim Takes Off anime? Yes. And for the
Yes.
same reasons that we said at the top of the show, it is entirely a geographical distinction. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was produced by Studio Science Saru, which is a Japanese animation company. It
It
is
would
an
be
anime.
like if Teen Titans were produced by Production IG or some other Japanese anime
Oh my
studio.
god, now I want Teen Titans done by Production IG.
I know, right?
Why did you do that to me? Why did you do that to me, Jake? Don't break my heart.
Hey, we are already getting Studio Wit doing Suicide Squad next year, okay?
I'm less eager about that. I would have rather had Studio Wit doing Teen Titans. But anyways, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Naturally, your mileage is going to depend entirely on if you have seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World or read Scott Pilgrim versus the World. You don't need to have seen and read it. You need to have seen or read it. You need to have had one of the previous iterations of Scott Pilgrim under your belt to
Hell, even the
appreciate.
video game.
I don't think there's quite enough in the video game. I would say it has to
Yeah,
be the graphic novel or the movie. Either will do. If you have both, all the better. But one or the other is going to be
I will
required reading,
say,
basically, to enjoy the show. But it is so damn good.
there is enough in the video game. Granted, I have read and seen, like, I have read the book, I have seen the movie, I have played through the game, but there is even enough in the game because I know people who have just played the game who have seen the anime and went, oh, wow, this was really good. So I know people who have just played the game who have watched the anime and enjoyed the anime. And that's also because they caught the references to the game in the
Mhm.
anime
Oh, yeah.
because
Oh, I
Anamanaguchi did the
freaked out
music.
when they used one of the boss themes in the last episode, and
Well, yeah,
the fact that it does.
the little boss intro jingle, the da 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 da
But
doom
also
doom da
just
da da
they
da.
used one of the main boss themes in the final fight in that series,
Yep.
full on, and it's such a incredible expansion of those characters and of that universe. The fact that they got the entire voice cast back
Yep.
is mind-boggling, and it really speaks to if you've watched interviews for the cast of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie, that they have often spoken of how much fun they had shooting the film, how much they connected with the other actors, and these being some A-list actors
That they're all
before they
still
were
friends with
true,
each
that
other.
they're also friends, and that the production team wasn't sure if they were going to be able to get everyone. They weren't sure if they were able to get anyone, but the fact that it is a Smash Brothers Ultimate, everyone is here situation.
Yeah.
Everyone made time in their schedule for this show, and that it still comes through in the performances. Watch the dub. This is one that just outright,
Yeah.
unless you are someone whose first language is Japanese, there is no reason to watch the Japanese dub of this because
Hell,
it
watch an
was
episode
yeah,
subbed if you are curious after watching it dubbed.
yeah,
Just because, yeah, curiosity. Why the hell
sure.
not?
But
But I mean,
this was made to be done in English, and the
yeah,
performances are so good. Scott
yeah.
Pilgrim takes off. Eh, for some people, this might be the anime of the year,
Yeah.
and for us,
And if it is your anime of the year, hey,
yeah.
more power to you. It is that damn good. But
But
there were three
2023 was top heavy.
oh yeah.
2023 was so top heavy that there are I would say that our number 5 down, depending on the year, might not have been as high as they were. That in certain years I could have seen Shy in the 8, 9, 10 slot. There are other years that I could see Shy in the 5, 6 slot again. I don't know if Shy would have ever gotten past 5. There are years where things in our honorable mentions might not have made the honorable mentions. There are a couple that in other years, they still would have been there, but our 1, 2, and 3 in some years might have been number 1. And this was the tough part for me, that over the past couple weeks, I've been staring at these 3 titles and shuffling them about, debating, weighing, and I ultimately came to what I had as my 1, 2, and 3. And when Jace and I hopped in a voice chat and you listed out, Jace, your 1, 2, and 3, they overlapped perfectly.
Yeah.
And that was basically everything I needed, because I actually expected when we sat down to discuss what is our ranking going to be, I was expecting the majority of our time to be spent sussing out 1, 2, and 3, or at least a good chunk of the time, and then that the others would fall into place after that. It was the opposite. You said 1, 2, and 3, and I said, "Oh, well, that's just what I have." And
I think the hardest part really came down to the fact that you know, well, we'll get to it when we get to them. Basically, it's the fact that our
these
number
series are
3
very
is
different in their
yeah,
content, in their approach, and also their, for lack of a better term, state of existence. One of these
yeah,
3 is complete, 2 are not. The way that they handled their premieres is different. The way that they have in terms of ongoing season, there's recency bias. There was a lot to consider, and I mentioned at the
yeah,
top of the show that anime, due to its seasonal and varying length nature, makes it so much more difficult to apples to apples compare than almost anything else, save for just TV shows, came into play here. But we wound up with 1, 2, and 3 being aligned. And number 3, I'm sorry, Neil Ivan, number 3 is Free Ren.
Beyond Journey's End. It's coming to us from Madhouse, airing on Crunchyroll.
This is
Looking at our
one
chat.
where premieres mean a lot.
Yeah,
And that if you have a strong premiere, it can get people in the door that otherwise wouldn't be. And that the concept of this is the adventurer's party after the adventure, and that one of them is a race that will live beyond the others. That is a solid premise any day of the week. This could have had a passable, good premiere, and it still probably would have been something that we watched and kept up with, and maybe even something that got into the top 10. The premiere of Free Ren is some of the most emotional 22 minutes that you're going to get in anime this
yeah,
year, period. It is so good. The characters grow, the way that the story progresses, and it's clear that there is more to tell. that Frieren is a return to formula in a lot of ways for anime and fantasy that I know that some other big anime YouTubers are really heralding it as sort of the revival of the proper fantasy genre. This is not isekai. This is not in another world. This is not some sort of video game adaptation. There aren't any complex systems of stats and
Power
mana,
levels.
power levels. It's just normal, raw fantasy. There is magic in this world. There is power in this world.
Zoltrek.
But it's so beautiful in its simplicity, and that it then lets the story and the characters carry everything. It doesn't bog you down with anything nitty-gritty. It doesn't bother with any heavy jargon. It's a very simple, accepted fantasy terminology.
Fun fact, all the characters have German names.
Oh yeah, they do. And it comes together so well. It's such a strong show, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing where it goes because obviously the story of Frieren can go very long as someone who can live for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And just one of the moments of the first course finale of the big fight coming down to a moment is one of the most, like, I shivered in my seat when that happened, and when you saw, without spoiling, the scales.
Yeah.
And when you saw Frieren let loose. It was so good.
I had chills.
I adore this series. Frieren is worth your time. If you have not seen it, do yourself a favor and see it.
The memes have been on point with this show.
Yeah, it has also gotten a bit of life with memes of it. Guys love this.
Yeah. It helps that the voice of Frieren is also the voice of Anya from Spy Family in Japan on top of it all.
Two very different characters.
Two very different characters, but my God, when they overlap personality-wise, they but I just like I absolutely adore her character, and like just the fire in her character coming out from time to time. It's just I adore this adventuring party. I love a good fantasy story. Like one of my all-time favorite animes is Slayers. So I mean, a good sword and sorcery means a lot to me. So of course, when something like Helk falls short, for something like Frieren to rise very high above, you know, like this is the cream of the crop for fantasy. I want to see more like this.
Yes.
Please, please. Isekai, no more. No more. Isekai is lazy, very lazy.
I think Isekai has a lot going for it. I've spoken about why the Isekai formula works because it allows the viewer to relate much easier to the main character. But I am hoping that this breathes some fresh life into the classical fantasy genre and reminds creators, reminds studios that you don't need isekai or game mechanics to succeed. I expect that we will still get plenty of it, but I'm hoping this is just sort of that nudge of, hey, don't write off classic fantasy.
Yeah,
if you
because
enjoy,
there is so much more to it. And
frankly, this is one, if you are looking to get someone into anime, if you have a friend who likes Lord of the Rings or other high fantasy series and just has felt anime is a bit too weird, a bit too extra, a bit too offbeat, Frieren is a series that I would show to my friend who isn't into anime but is into traditional fantasy.
If anything, I would call this the second coming of Lodos War.
Haven't seen that, to be truthful, so I can't confirm or deny.
Record of Lodos War is basically, you know, for those of us who are old taku, it is high fantasy. It is very D&D, Lord of the Rings, heavily inspired, we're talking old school, big, long, pointy-eared elves, long-lived. Like, Frieren is a return to that high fantasy, and it's not a genre that Japan does very often, but my God, when Japan does it right, they do it right. And I would love to see a few more authors and a few more studios take this on some more. So I'm hoping,
Mm,
Madhouse is one of the, like Mount Rushmore. They are one of those top tier studios. If somebody was going to do it, it was going to be Madhouse. I'm glad that we are getting more of this, going into the new year. So let's ring in the new year with, some more of Boomer Elf and her accidentally getting chomped on by mimic shenanigans.
indeed. Number 2 is a show I'm frustrated more people haven't seen. It is one that I saw a couple of posts when it was first released saying, "Watch this show. It's a 10
Mm.
out of 10." It is
Omega
the
Zed
best show
actually, he brought that up actually first in our Discord.
I remember seeing people say, "This is my anime of the year." It is one that I fully believe in other years could have been our anime of the year. But like we
Mm,
said, the top 3 was so strong. And the fact that this is a adaptation of one of the perhaps depending on what you consider the dawn of anime, the first anime, and the fact that I was able to go in with really no knowledge and just as a standalone series say, this is one of the best stories I've seen this year in really any medium. The characters, the production, the performances. Our number 2 is Pluto.
mm. Pluto hits hard.
The first episode is there's so many series that want to do AI, especially with the world that we are living in the year of 2023, dawn of 2024, of everything from AI art to other AI systems, that there were multiple series this year, and there have been many. It's not something that is original to Japanese culture or anime, that we have had representations of AI in media for ages, for decades, beyond decades, for as long as computers have existed. The concept of where is the line of consciousness and where does AI and human blur. And there were other series that attempted these themes this year and just sort of fumbled or started okay and then got bland or didn't know where to go. This series not only did that, but then just it didn't make it all about that question. It then just had one of the most compelling mystery noir stories. You could have stripped out all of the AI theming, and it still
Yep.
would have been probably at number 2 just based on its noir and its mystery
Yeah.
and its writing alone. But the fact that it had that, and then this being a technically an adaptation of Astro Boy, one of the,
Yep.
if not the first ever anime, and the fact that I, who have never seen an Astro Boy series, I obviously know who Astro Boy is. I know of Astro Boy. I don't know anything about the backstory or the characters, but that having looked things up after the fact, realizing how much is woven in, and if you are a Astro Boy fanatic, this is going to raise even higher for you. But that you don't need context. You need context for Scott Pilgrim. You don't need
Yeah.
anything for Pluto.
No, this is a hard swerve, considering the fact that this is based off of a arc from Astro Boy, the greatest robot in Earth arc, named after the villain of the arc, Pluto. So now here's an interesting fact about it. This actually won the mangaka Naoki Urasawa the ninth Tezuka Osamu Cultural Prize uh, for this manga. And this is only the second of his manga to actually be adapted, I believe, into or no, third, I think, because his other include Master Keaton and Monster. The man is great with detective stories, so adapting Pluto into a detective story was a stroke of genius, actually. So, and boy, do they keep you guessing throughout
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole thing.
And they have that right amount of, if you watch it afterwards, you can see the evidence. And then they do also keep back a certain number of things of, there's a couple snippets that you would have no way of knowing. There's a couple of things that they don't explain, but that don't need to be explained. And that balance is a very fine line, and they toe it wonderfully. I suggest this one as a dub. It's fine subtitled, but that the English performance is so solid.
Phenomenal English dub.
And frankly, I would suggest the dub simply because this is such an emotional series that certain things get lost in translation via tone, and that if you are listening to something in your first language, that you will understand emotion and tone much better than in a language that you don't, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And because of how much emotion and humanity, yes, very deliberately using that term here, is woven into the story and the dialogue, I think you would actually be doing yourself a disservice to watch this in a language other than your first language.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the dub is certainly an all-star dub. I mean, right away, one of the most recognizable voices that jumped out at me was Richard Epker,
Yeah.
notable for, of course, Raiden in Mortal Kombat, and of course in Bato and Ghost in
Mhm.
the Shell.
You have Patrick
So
Seitz as North Number 2, who carries the second half of episode 1,
yeah,
obviously known for Dio Brando, among many, many other roles, and that everyone brought their A game here. There's so much heart put into this, and it is a case where the writing gives them everything to work with. The actors do it
Keith David
amazingly.
is Professor Tenma.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh, it it is difficult to understate how just, we already said 1, 2, and 3 was difficult. 1 and 2 is so tough. 1 and 2
yeah,
is so freaking tough that I
yeah.
I actually
And
stopped
this,
watching
it
this
was
at
tough
episode
because
6 and left it alone for a couple of months before finishing in the last couple of weeks because I didn't want it to end because it was so good, and I knew that it was already going to be in my top 3. I knew that by the end of episode 6. I was like, "You would have to bungle this hardcore for it to fall because it's been
yeah,
so dang good already." And when I finished it, I was just sort of sitting there like, it's one of those things where you just sort of exhale and say, "Wow."
it's so tough too because I am not normally a binge watch person, but this year Netflix hit me so hard within 1 month between Onimusha, Scott Pilgrim, and Pluto within the course of literally 3 weeks or 4 weeks of each other, and
Mhm.
each one was like 8 episodes,
And I just,
and Pluto were like 1 hour long
yeah,
episodes.
it is a bulky series, but they use their time wisely. There is
Yeah.
no scene that I look at and say, "This was wasted. This
Watch
was
an episode a
padding."
day and, you'll be done in a little over a week,
Yeah,
and you will feel a sense of accomplishment from
it's
watching one of the best detective dramas
this is
that
another
is.
one that I'm referring people who aren't into anime to, that, uh one of the big things right now on Netflix has been Blue Eye Samurai, which is not eligible because it was not produced in Japan, but that a lot of folks who don't watch animated fare have been watching. That I've been nudging a couple folks who have said, "Oh man, I really love Blue Eye Samurai." I've been saying, "Hey, have you watched Pluto? Have you watched Pluto?" Because it is so good, and it is
Yeah.
one that I'm worried that it didn't get the publicity that it should have gotten. And Netflix did advertise it, but it's just one of those things where, despite being Astro Boy, it it's not necessarily that name brand, and especially given the titling that this wasn't Astro Boy colon Pluto. I feel like the series actually would have done better if it had that name, but at the same time, I feel like just naming it Pluto, that it's an enigma of a name, and that it feels more
Yeah.
appropriate, even if I don't think that was the proper marketing choice for the series. So go watch and then go tell your friends and family to watch it too.
Yeah. It is a phenomenal series. And I mean, high praise, high praise.
And that brings us to number 1, the 2023 DEECide Anime of the Year.
Anime of the Year.
When considering what would push something over the edge and make it number 1, there was so much to consider that we have already talked about. Just how does it start? How does it end? The production, the performance, the themes, the writing. And with all of that, 1, 2, and 3 already could have done so much. The premiere means a lot, but more so than that, I think what sets apart our number 1 is we never want to weigh popularity of a series in terms of being a major consideration. That there's a lot of popular series that are not on our top 10s, and you can look year over year. You look at where Jujutsu Kaisen was. I don't remember where it was. I think it was like number 7 or 8. We don't have Undead Unluck, which is one of the premier big new shonen shows this year. We definitely skew more towards the auteur side of things, if I do say so myself.
I mean, Dance Dance Dancer last year.
But sometimes you have a series that deserves the hype. Something that hits into the mainstream, and that even if you look at it under a critical lens, you just say, yeah, that's really freaking good. And that we do retrospective shows here on DEECide every so often where we take a show that is aired at least a decade prior. We take a year that is at least a decade prior and go through all the shows that released that year and sort of walk down memory lane and say, oh, that show aired that year. That if we were to do a retrospective show of 2023, I am beyond confident that our number 1 would be the show that when we would get to it and say, oh, that show aired in 2023. That was a big deal. It is still relatively early in its run. It obviously has a lot to go. But what it did with what it has had so far was so strong. It had to be number 1. The DEECide Anime of the Year for 2023 is Oshinoko. I remember waking up and just going on social media and seeing, go watch Oshinoko.
Oh, I was at Anime
right
Boston that weekend, actually. I got to see it before it dropped on High Dive. And I said, yeah, no, as soon as this drops on High Dive, go watch it.
There were people that I don't talk with very often that I saw mention on Discord, hey, you all want to get a watch party together, watch Oshinoko? And it's like, I've already seen it, but I want to be there to watch you watch Oshinoko. That the number of covers of the OP song Idol,
yeah, which sidebar, Yoasobi, most searched music act on Google this year.
Also did the opening to Free Ren.
Yep. 2 bangers in 1 year for our top 1 and 3 animes of the year.
If I had a nickel for every time
Yoasobi did the opening for one of our top 3 animes this year,
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Oshinoko is the full package.
Yeah.
Like I said, it deserves the hype. Obviously, most prolifically, its 90-minute premiere episode does something that I think we're going to see a trend spawn from, and probably it's going to become overdone. But Oshinoko really couldn't have gone any other way. If it had ended after the first 23, 30 minutes, I think a lot of people would have dropped off because it would have abided very nicely by your normal 3-episode rule where you say, watch the first 3 episodes, and that since it still would have had its big moment at the end of episode 3, it could have done well. But I think artistically and just in terms of getting the audience to know what they need to know about this series. That having it be 3 separate episodes, having episode 1 end after that 23, 30-minute mark would have been a disservice to the series and its viewers. But then continuing past that premiere, that it tackled some very real, very heavy topics about the anime industry. The characters are all deep. They are all people. They are all human. You have the mystery element. You have our main character who is going through this different journey while keeping certain secrets and also struggling themselves. There is so much going on in Oshinoko, and you can bet that once season 2, I forget when it's going to be airing. I know it's been announced, obviously.
Yeah.
But that it's going to be one of the most anticipated shows of that season when it has its next season. And I expect that it will continue to be an anticipated show for however long its run goes.
Episode 6 probably hit the hardest by far too, because we here at Digital Era, of course, are fans of a lot of different things across the pop culture spectrum, myself included. Big fan of not just anime and video games, but also wrestling. So of course, I am in tune with the Japanese pro wrestling scene, and episode 6 dealt with cyberbullying and the attempted suicide of one of the characters in that episode echoed an actual unfortunate real life event involving a Japanese pro wrestler, Hana Kimura. Holy crap. Like, I was speechless watching. Like, actually, there were a lot of moments with this show that left me feeling speechless because it hits so hard when dealing with the entertainment industry. Like, this is more than just this is more than just a drama about, okay, well, who killed, Ai Hoshino, and who killed, who killed, him before he reincarnated. Like, this is more than just that. Like, there is so much more at play here in this story. And we've only had what, like 12 episodes?
And every character matters. Every character has a story.
Yeah.
There's no throwaway character.
Yeah.
So go watch Oshinoko. If for some reason you have not watched Oshinoko yet, go watch it, please. Even if you've been spoiled on what happens, because we did kind of spoil it.
Go to High Dive, check it out.
Anyways.
I might even before season 2 comes out, hopefully next year, I might even just check out the dub, because it did get a dub as well. But I mean, part of the appeal, of course, is that music. So of course, the music being in Japanese, you might want to watch it in Japanese because of that. Yeah, I mean, Oshinoko is a freaking
it's a
roller
powerhouse,
coaster,
and it is our anime of the year. And that's going to do it. So recapping once again, our honorable mentions in no particular order: My Home Hero, Dark Gathering, Ragnar Crimson, Skip and Loafer, Trigun Stampede, and I'm in Love with the Villainess. And then our top 10: number 10, 16-Bit Sensation; number 9, The Magical Revolution; number 8, Tomo-Chan as a Girl; number 7, Undead Murder Farce; number 6, Heavenly Delusion; number 5, Shy; number 4, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off; number 3, Free Ren; number 2, Pluto; and number 1, Oshinoko. And that's 2023 for anime and for DEECi.
Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us across social media for updates. Thanks for watching!